In this video, we're going to learn about the Tailwind CSS framework by building out this pretty simple landing page. So there's a lot that goes into this using the Tailwind framework. And real quick for my intro, my name is Chris on Code. I founded a website called scotch.io. It's web dev tutorials. And I'm also making courses at makereactapps.com and maketailwindapps.com. So to get us started, Tailwind CSS is my favorite CSS framework right now, but it is a little bit different than the other CSS frameworks you may be used to, like Bootstrap or Bulma or Foundation. The thing about Tailwind CSS is that it is called a utility-first CSS framework right here, and you'll notice that you don't have pre-built classes like you would in Bootstrap. Like we don't have a card class, we don't have a button class. So what Tailwind gives us is a bunch of these what are called utility classes. And these utility classes we're going to combine so that we can build out a card class or a card component. Now, the main feedback against Tailwind is that a lot of these classes can start to make your HTML look a lot of busy. Like there's a lot of words here that could be extracted out when you're using a normal CSS framework. The thing about Tailwind for me is that it lets me prototype designs and components super quickly. And I actually really like it. So I will say I didn't really like Tailwind CSS at first, but the more and more I worked with it, the more I liked it until it is now my favorite CSS framework. So I'm just saying give it a chance while we build out our landing page and maybe you'll grow to like it by the end. To start us off, we're going to go into CodePen.io. I'm going to create a brand new CodePen. And let's go into our little CSS settings icon right here. We don't need Sass, so I'm going to go none there. And then down here for external style sheets, let's do Tailwind. And then we can click this right here. It'll add the Tailwind CSS file to this CodePen, and now we can start using Tailwind. If you were using Tailwind in a more production-ready application, you'd probably install it using a NPM package, and the installation docs on Tailwind are really good for doing stuff like that. For this video, we just want to get our feet wet with Tailwind and see how it works. So now that we have Tailwind, the cool thing is that we will probably not have to write any custom CSS. Normally, if you were working with Bootstrap, you would write a div class is equal to card. And let me zoom in here for you all, change presentation mode. And let's see if that Tailwind is still there. It is, cool. So let's say we have a div class is card, which is what you'd see in Bootstrap. This is my card. This is kind of what you'd see in Bootstrap, but then let's say you didn't like how the drop shadow worked in Bootstrap. You would have to go into your CSS, say card, and then you would have to change out the box shadow yourself and then customize it that way. So you also might have to do something like 0, 0, 2 pixels, whatever it is, RGBA. So let's say you changed it out, but then let's say that you wanted it to 100% take over the original card styles, you would have to do important. So now you're getting into a territory where a lot of your CSS, your custom CSS, has this important flag on it, and that's not really the best when you are on larger teams or have many different classes running around your code base. So for this, we don't have to write any custom CSS. Let's go ahead and create a card class in Tailwind, and let's see how it's done. So I have here, this is my card. We're going to want a background to be white, and let me zoom in a little further here. So let's say background is white, which you won't really tell because our background is normally white right here. Let's do a padding of 4 so that we get padding all the way around. And the thing with Tailwind is that it is a little bit harder to start. There's a barrier to entry when you're starting Tailwind, but the docs are very good. Let's say I wanted some padding classes. You would go over to the Tailwind docs, go up to the search bar, type in padding, and then, you would type in padding, click padding here, and then you would see all of the classes and the property that it gives you here. Also important to note, there is a VS Code extension for auto-completing Tailwind CSS classes for you, so that helps your development environment. But here, what you'll learn is that when you're starting Tailwind, you'll be doing a lot of going back to the docs, searching, and kind of remembering the classes. But this is kind of the same with any CSS framework because you're going to have to memorize and learn the classes for each specific framework. So go here, we have padding 4, and you'll see there's a padding all the way around there. And kind of to give this a little bit more of a background, let's do div here, class. I'm going to do div right here, and then I'm going to say minimum height is the full height of the screen, so min height screen, and that's just a Tailwind class to do minimum height. And I'm going to say padding 20 all the way around. Now let's do a background of blue at 400. And the way that Tailwind does colors is that there are a couple different colors, and they all run from shades from 100, which is super light, almost white, and then all the way up to 900. So you have 100, 200, 300, etc., all the way up to 900. So let's keep this at maybe 500. So you can see how quickly we can start prototyping out designs thanks to Tailwind. If we go down here into our background white P4, we can actually do a rounded class right here. And I'm writing all this from memorization just because I've used Tailwind so much. You can also do rounded large, which is cool. So it kind of gets you a little bit rounder of the edges. You could do rounded top so that you can round out just the top, and you'll notice that the bottom are squared out right there. And let me zoom in there. You could also say shadow, and that would give it a little drop shadow. You can say shadow 2XL, and that gives a much larger shadow right there. So as we start to learn the Tailwind classes, we can start prototyping out our designs really quickly. And this is why I like Tailwind, is you can do this really quickly in your browser, in your HTML, and not have to like create a class called card and then create your card class right here and then do all that stuff right there. What is interesting to note, if you are using Sass and the NPM module for Tailwind, right now we're just using the CSS file right here. If you are using the NPM version and using all of the build system setup, you can actually use Sass to say apply, and then you can move all of your classes from here down here, and then that would work. So that's one way to make Tailwind a little bit easier to read when you look at your HTML. For today's video, we're not going to worry about that. We're just going to write all of our classes in line. So let's get started here. I'm going to delete all of that stuff right there. Let's go back to our Tailwind landing page. So you'll notice that there are 4 distinct sections here. We have the header. We have this main hero with our doggo. We scroll down. It's basically like a features section where you can promote different parts of your product or whatever you're doing. And then down here, a footer with a newsletter and maybe a copyright. So by building out all 4 of these parts, we're going to learn a lot about Tailwind and CSS in general. The cool thing I like about Tailwind is that it's really a lot of just shorthand for CSS. So you do need to know your CSS to be writing Tailwind classes. So let's go back to here. We're going to have a couple different parts. We're going to have the header. We're going to have the hero. We're going to have features section. And then we're also going to have the footer. We're going to have the footer plus newsletter section. Okay, so to start us off, I'm going to create a div right here. And then inside of this div, we are going to have a logo. So we'll have a logo right here. We'll probably just do an image tag source, and I'll keep that blank for now. And we always want an alt on these for like logo. And then we're going to have a little bit of a navigation. So we're going to say A times 2 right here. And let's say this goes nowhere, homepage. And then we're going to have this one go nowhere as well, since we're just trying to stub out some links. And this will just be the about page. We need an image here. So I'm going to go to iconfinder.com. And then let's just search for mountain. I already did it right here. I'm going to say free icons only. And then over here, I like this one. Let's click that one. And let's get the 64 pixel version. That kind of looks weird. So let's do copy image address. Come back over to our CodePen and paste that in. Okay, and then let's set a width on it for, let's say 50, and that'll be a good way to do it. Okay, so we have our image and our links right here. Let's wrap this in a div because we're going to call that the left side of our navigation. And then let's call this the right side. And then here is the left side. And now the right side, we're going to have a div here. And inside of this div, we're going to have two links, one for a login button and one for a sign up button. So let's say A times 2, and we'll just do that right there. And let's get back in here. Let's say login right there. Let's enter right here, and we'll do a hashtag and the sign up button right here. Okay, so far, no Tailwind classes yet. I'm going to save that. We're going to start doing our Tailwind now by doing class right here, background indigo at 400. Looking good. And then you can just kind of play around with the colors for yourself. If you want a different color, you can do background indigo 600. There's also like a pink, there's a red, there's an orange, yellow. And if you go to tailwindcss.com, you can go colors and then customizing colors. Down here, default color palette. And this just comes from memorization of knowing the docs. It's kind of just what you're going to have to get used to is traveling the docs and learning all the different sections. So here we have black and white, gray. I think it's a very good looking starter color palette. For your projects, you can even customize the color, the shades. But here's red, orange, yellow, green, teal, blue, indigo, purple, pink. Looking good. And there's 9 shades for each. For us, we're going to go indigo. And let's keep this at 700. And then we need a padding on the top and bottom here. So we can say padding 4. But that's padding on top, right, left, and bottom. If we wanted just bottom and top, we would say padding Y for the Y-axis, padding Y4. Okay. But since we kind of want this to not sit next to the side of our browser, let's do padding all the way around of 4. That will do well. And then we need these things to sit side by side. So we need the left side and the right side to kind of sit side by side. The cool thing about this is we're going to use CSS Flexbox, which I absolutely love. We're going to say flex, and that would make them side by side because Flexbox takes all the children and kind of sits them side by side. And then we're going to say justify between so that they split left and all the way to the right. And then we're going to say items center, which is align items center to kind of get everything in the middle. So these 3, justify between, items center, and flex, are the way we can use our Flexbox classes to move things around. On the left side here, we need these 2 to sit side by side with the icon. Actually, all 3 of these need to sit side by side. So let's say class is flex. And we need them to sit in the middle again. So we'll say items center for align items center. All right, that looks good there. So you'll notice that a lot of this is memorization and just learning the classes. But once you do, you can start prototyping quickly. So let's say this A right here, I want to do class is going to be inline block so that we can get some padding to take on it. Padding Y of 2 for padding on the Y axis of 2. Padding X of 3. Actually, we can shorthand that to padding of 3 so that it's all the way around is padding 3. And these all correspond to a certain rem in the Tailwind docs. All right, so we have that. We definitely want a text color on each of these. So let's say text indigo. And again, with the colors, we have shades from 100 to 900. So we'll say 300 here. This is what's cool about Tailwind is, I keep saying this is what's cool about Tailwind. There's a lot of cool things. But here, text indigo 300, you can do from 100 to 900. And when you're building out your color schemes, it's good to not have text just be pure white. It's really good to have a text be a similar color to the background it's on so that it's not so jarring. And if we check, there's text indigo and here's text white. Notice how that kind of just like really pops off the background. It's not as pleasing to the eyeballs. So if we do text indigo 300 or 200, if you wanted a little bit lighter, that would work out right there. So we'll keep it at 200. All right, that's looking good. Let me zoom out on my font so that we get a little more room. We're going to want some spacing between this right here, the icon, and then we're going to want some spacing after this home. So what we can do is class, just like we had the P2 for padding, and we can do P2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, And then once you get up to 8, it gets a little goofy. It goes to 10, to 12, to 16, to 20. Definitely look at the docs so you can learn the numbering scheme in Tailwind. But in addition to padding, we can actually do margin. So we'll say margin right of 2. And there's going to be spacing right there that gets added. And then this one as well for the home button, margin right of 2. So that gets pushed over a little bit as well. The next step here is what we usually want our links to do is kind of show an indication that they're being hovered. We can go and hover over them. You might be wondering, okay, well, how do we handle hovering things in Tailwind? Do I have to go down here and say, you know, button hover like that with the pseudo class? Nope. Hover is actually done with a classes as well, which is kind of interesting. You can say hover text indigo at 100. So when you hover it, it changes to whatever is after the colon. So text indigo 100, you could even do text like red 100 and see that color change. Not as much, but we'll do 500 really show it off. There we go. So that's how you can handle hover states in Tailwind. I'm going to change this back to indigo, let's say 100. You usually don't want it to be too far off of this 200. So we're at 200 here. You probably want hover at 200 and then, or sorry, you want the normal at 200 and the hover just one shade away at the 100. So we'll copy that and paste that there as well. Cool. So let's start working on the right side of this. We have the login button and the sign up button, which we want the sign up button to be a little bit more prominent. So let's do this right here. I'm going to say class is equal to inline block. Let's say padding 2 all the way around. Text indigo 300. All right, so that's good right there. Or actually, let's go 200 so it matches the left side. Sorry about that. 200 and 200 right there. So the sign up button, we want to be a little bit more prominent. So let's give it a different text color and a background color. So we have text indigo. Let's change this to background yellow at 400. So notice how we can change the text color with text. We can change the background with BG. And a lot of the classes have similar naming schemes, but you just change out a couple different parts of the name. So we have background yellow 400. We probably want this text to go to yellow as well so it matches. But we want it to go darker since that's not dark enough. So let's say around 700. That's looking good. Let's give it a little bit more padding. So let's do padding Y of 2 and then padding X of 4 so we can get a little wider. And then let's do a margin right of 2 on the login button so we'll get some spacing. We can go back to the sign up button and say rounded here so that it gets that nice rounded edge. Okay, that looks good. Actually, I think on our demo app we did sign up as 2 words. I'm not sure if it's 2 or 1. It depends, I guess. It might be 1 since login is 1. Oh well. Do whatever you feel is best for your applications here. So we can also do the hover as well on this. So I'm going to say hover BG yellow at 300. And then also hover text is yellow at maybe 800. So it's a little darker and then also the background is a little brighter. There we go. Now you might be wondering, okay, well, how do we add transitions in Tailwind so that it's not so jarring between the first color and the second color? We can go over here and say transition, and then you do a space. You need 3 properties for transition. You need the transition, which is just going to say, okay, set this to be able to transition. You're going to want ease in, which is the easing function. And then you're also going to want a duration. So let's say duration 150. And that's in milliseconds, so you can hover that like that. And if you ever wonder what these classes make, you can definitely look at the docs, or you can right-click, inspect, and then down here, you can see duration 150 gets you the 150 milliseconds, ease in gets you that timing function with the cubic Bezier, and transition is going to transition those properties. Definitely a lot to learn about Tailwind as far as what classes do what. The docs are your best resource, I think. So that's our header. We have our 2 buttons here, our button over here, which has no hover. You can add that right here. Hover, indigo, or sorry, text indigo 100. And I try to like keep the hover right next to the original state. So if it's text indigo, I'll put the hover for the text right next to it. And that's kind of how I personally like to format my stuff. Let's bring this down to 16 pixels. All right, so that is going to be our header. Let me save that. Let's scroll down. I'm going to add some equal signs so we get a little bit better separation of our sections. Probably not the best, but it's kind of how I like to do things. So I'll do that at the very top for the header as well. All right, so that's our header. Let's see if we can build out our hero section. If we go back and look at our hero section, we have one column here. We have an image over here. I'm going to right click and copy image address. You can definitely go to unsplash.com for an image, search for something. You can click on anything right here. Let's say this one, right click, copy image address, and you can use that image in your CodePen. And whenever you move this to production, you definitely want to download the image, reference the author of the image, and do all that good stuff. But for here, since we're just building on a really quick CodePen, we will just copy the image address and we'll put it into our CodePen right here. So I'll just copy this right here and just leave that as a comment. All right, so let's go here. We're going to say our hero section, definitely have a div in here. And the way I like to do this in Tailwind is I like to structure the HTML first before I start adding styles. So we'll have the main hero, which is that big area. We're going to have the left and right sides. So we'll say div times 2. So this will be left. And I'll do a little bit of comment here, left and right. Okay, so once we have those two here, we're going to say on the left side, we want an H2 tag. We're going to say, welcome to Doggo City. And then here, we're going to have a P tag. There is never a sad day in Doggo City. Here. All right, so then we're going to have two buttons, A times 2. We're going to have that go nowhere. We're going to say learn more. And also a get started. Since this is usually how landing pages go, right? There's this learn more, and then there's like the bigger call to action. So that's the left side. On the right side, we're just going to have an image, and the source is going to be that right there. And then let's do an alt is happiest doggo. On this image right here, we set the width with the width property. We're going to do this in CSS. So we're going to say class width is full. And if you go over to the Tailwind docs, you can look at the width docs right here. There's also max and min width. You can see there's width 0, and there's certain numbers which calculate in rems. And then down here, you'll see there's width auto. There's also width, and you can use the divisible. So you can say half, 1/3, 2/3, really cool. And then width full is the one we want, which is right here. So we'll take that as width 100%. We'll go back to our CodePen. We're going to say width full so that it never overflows over its container. So since we need these two to sit side by side, we're going to go up to class and just take a look at our code. This is just the HTML, right? We have quick HTML written out for us. Now let's see how Tailwind can bring in the styles for us. I'm going to delete this comment right here. We no longer need that. So class, we're going to say is flex so that they sit side by side. We're going to say justify between so they sit on the far left and the far right. We definitely want some padding. So let's do padding of maybe on padding Y of 20 and then padding X of 10. There we go. We definitely need a background on here. So background indigo 600 and text indigo at 100 so that we can get our background color and our text color. There we go. That's looking good. And then now we need to set a width for both of these. So we're going to go over here. Class is equal to width dash 1 divided by 2. So width 50%. Class here is width equals 1/2. There we go. So now the doggo doesn't overflow over this column, and we can right click inspect here. And if we scroll down there, where is my, there's the doggo. Okay. So width half right there, and then width 1/2 right there. And you can adjust the widths for yourself. So you can maybe make this smaller and the doggo bigger. All depends on what you do for your width class right here. Some quick wins we can do. We can go down here for width full, add the rounded class, add a shadow class, and let's do shadow 2XL to give them a little more shadow on the bottom. There we go. That looks good there. We'll leave doggo there and let's go back to the left side. We have class on our H2. We haven't really done anything with font sizing yet. So let's do text 2XL. And there's also 2XL all the way up to 6XL. There's also text large, text small, text extra small, and it all depends here. So let's actually do something a little bit larger, 4XL. We also need to maybe make this a little bit whiter and lighter so that it has more prominence. So we can say text white and just go pure white right there. We can also say margin bottom of maybe 6 or 5. So we get a little spacing after the paragraph. And then our paragraph, we can also say class margin bottom of 6 so that we get some spacing to the buttons. So that looks good there. Now you might be wondering, okay, well this text is pretty large, especially on a smaller device. And notice how our columns aren't really splitting down for mobile devices. So this is kind of getting into the responsive territory for Tailwind. Tailwind has a really cool way to add responsive. Just like we used the hover colon, we can actually add a responsive class using breakpoints. So here we have medium. So anything on medium, it'll be text 4XL. So right now, see how it's mobile? There's no text sizing on it. And then as it gets larger right there, that's where it breaks and becomes the larger. And then you can even do like large is text 6XL. And if I go a little bit larger, there we go. It got even larger on the biggest screen size there. So Tailwind lets us easily add mobile and responsive styles using these medium colon classes. The thing is here, we only want this to be flexbox. We only want them to sit side by side if we're on probably medium or large. So let's say large. So on not large screens, so that's mobile screens or iPad or tablet screens, it will sit on one on top. And then as we go larger, they'll sit side by side. We can actually probably do medium on that so that we get the breakpoint a little bit earlier. Yep, there we go. Or sorry, breakpoint a little bit later. And then also here, we probably want this to be width full normally and only width half on medium screen. So I'm going to do this right here and this right here, medium colon. But the thing here is that we want to have a margin bottom on smaller screens. See how they're kind of sitting on top of each other? So you can say margin bottom of 10 normally. And then on medium screens, margin bottom of 0. So as I scroll over here, margin bottom 0, margin bottom 10 at this breakpoint. So I know that was a lot. There is a little bit of finagling for the responsiveness, but once you get a hang of it, it's really quick to write out responsive queries instead of going into here and say media, screen, and max width, and kind of figuring out your breakpoint yourself, 480 pixels, and then doing your classes, right? You can do all of that right inside of your CSS classes, right in your HTML. So let's keep going. I kind of want this to be larger even on mobile, so we can say text 2XL on normal screens, and then as it gets bigger, the text gets bigger. Let's start doing our classes for our A tags right here. Class is equal to, let's say inline block so that the padding can take, padding Y of 3, padding X of 6. And I'm going to start speeding this up a little bit. So text large. All right, so learn more. We definitely don't want to be as prominent as the get started. So we're going to say background gray at 400. And then we're going to say text gray at 800. Also rounded and margin right of 2 so that it doesn't sit right next to this get started. On the get started, we're going to say background orange of, let's say 400. Text orange at 800. And rounded as well. And then also on hover, let's do background orange at maybe 300 so it's a little bit lighter. There we go. And you can add the transitions yourself if you like that look. But right here, oh, we probably need a hover on this one too. So I'll say hover BG gray at 300. There we go. So that's going to do it for our header section right there. You've gotten responsive styles, you've gotten some text sizing, you've gotten flexbox and stacking for responsive. You could probably add some responsiveness to the header as well. So if I come up here, here's our header, the left side and the right side. We could easily say, hey, hidden, but when you're on medium, you go block, which probably is not the best thing to do to hide your sign up button on mobile devices, but that is one way to do it. So definitely think of ways that you could add in responsive styles to make this look good. Probably just not have them sit side by side and remove the flex box. All right, we have two of our sections done. We have the header done. We have the hero section done. So that's looking good. Let's start moving into our other two sections. And I hope that so far that you haven't run away from all the Tailwind classes in our HTML and kind of get the value from being able to prototype this design really quickly, and we still haven't written a single line of custom CSS. I think that's super powerful. Let's start looking at our second two sections. It's basically the feature section where we have a list of 4 doggos and some text. And then we have our footer newsletter, and we'll talk about forms in a second. So let's go back to our CodePen, and I'm going to spread this over here. We go back to our features section. So to start us off, again, let's do the HTML first. We have a div here, and then inside of that div, we're going to have 4 divs. And then inside of each of those divs, we're going to have an image tag plus a p tag. And you got to love that Emmet kind of autocomplete visualization in CodePen. Really like that. So image source, you can go to unsplash.com and grab, there's Unsplash, grab 4 random images, right click, copy image address. I'm going to grab them from our sample right here, copy image address here, paste that right there, copy image address here, paste that right there. And I grabbed all these from Unsplash to start with, copy image address. And one more. Right there. For the p tag, let's do cuddles. Let's do smiles. I forget what we put there. Games and swims. Okay, so let's do games and swims right here. All right, so these images are already pretty large. What we want to do here is let's set a width on these. So let's go over here to each of these, and I'll just remove the alt for now, which is not something you should do in production. But we'll do class right here, and width is full. And they're going to still stay the exact same since they're the full width of our section. So we're going to go over here, and on top of it, we're going to say class is flex. So now they'll sit side by side, and each one is going to take up 25% of this section. The next step here is let's do some padding. Padding Y of 16, padding X of 10. So that's top and bottom 16, left and right 10. We're going to say background indigo at 800, text indigo at 200. And the text will span all the way down to these because it cascades down, good old CSS. And then let's do text center, and that will center all of these. So now for the images, to get a little bit of spacing on them, we're going to take this width full, and I'm going to copy all of them. And then let's do a class for margin right of 2. Let's get them rounded. Let's add a margin bottom of 4. And actually, we need the margin right of 2 on the container div. So all of these are in the wrong spot. Sorry about that. Let's go back here, remove that. We'll go to each of the parent divs right here. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I know it's getting a little messy. That's kind of how, there we go. Let's space them out and get a little bit better. So class, margin right of 2, text center right there. There we go. So that's looking good. What we can also do to get this a little bit styled differently is we could do a border, which we haven't done just yet. So let's copy all of these rounded, 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 rounded. I'm going to say border, solid, border, 2 for the width, and then you can also change out the color for the border. You could do yellow 400. But for us, we'll probably stick with indigo right there. So now we have that section right there. And what we can also do is for the second and fourth images, we have margin right of 2. Let's do margin top of maybe 8 and get a little bit of weird spacing here. Yeah, so now it's kind of offset right there. And then down here, we can say margin top of 8 as well. So we get this fun offsetting effect right there. And now let's start moving towards our footer section. You could definitely play around with some responsive styles also for this so that we could say, okay, your flexbox on normal screens, on larger screens, and normally you're just display blocks. So if we start scrolling down right here, they'll start stacking on top of each other. And then you'd have to update to bring in some margins right there. But right now, let's leave it like that. And let's start moving towards our footer so that we can get into forms. We're going to have a div. Let's do our HTML as we started always. Div, inside of that, we're going to have 2 divs times 2 right there, and which is the left and right section of our newsletter. Let's go take a peek at it again. So left is this newsletter. Right is just a copyright for doggos from 2020 all the way to infinity. So let's go up here. Times 2. Okay, cool. Inside of this, we're going to have an H3, and we're going to say join the newsletter. And then down here, we want to be semantically correct. So let's do a form. Form right there. Form. And we're going to have an input. Type is email. And then a button for join. That looks good there. Let's make sure that we have our comments. So let's say left, commented out right there, and right, commented out right there. And the right side is going to be a simple one, copyright, and copy, doggos 2020 to infinity. All right, so let's say that we definitely want this class is equal to, we want some padding again, so let's do padding y of 10, padding x of 10. And remember that I could just shorthand this to p-10 for padding all the way around at 10. Let's do a background indigo at 900. Probably the footer is going to be the darkest section of our site. There it is. And text indigo at 400. So that works out nicely. We definitely want these to sit side by side. So we'll say flex justify between again. That works out nicely as well. And notice how CodePen kind of keeps jumping us up to the top. We just have to scroll down on updates. That's okay. So left side, H3 is right here. Let's do a class. Text is large, and I just want a margin bottom of 2 on it so that it spaces away from that newsletter. And I'm sorry about the jump. Let me go in and comment out some stuff so that we can avoid that movement in CodePen. So I'll comment this out. We'll come back later and comment it back in. There's that. And then let's drop the header, the hero section as well. All right. And that, there we go. Uh-oh, I messed up. Okay, that's fine. We'll leave the header in, and then let's scroll back to the bottom here and get back to our footer. So our form is right here. The way that we're going to handle our form is this input. We're going to say class is equal to width is full. We're going to say rounded. And then our button here as well, we're going to say class is going to be, let's say, background red at 300, text red at 800, and also rounded. And we want these two things to sit side by side, so let's do on our form class is flex. If we want this to be larger, let's go up to our left side. Class is equal to width 1/2. And remember, we only want 1/2 on larger screens, so we'll do that. And our form went the full width. Now let's give some padding to the input and the button. So we'll say padding Y of maybe 3 and padding X of maybe 4. All right, so that seems to be a little large. That's okay. Let's do outline none. For accessibility purposes, though, we definitely want there to be an indication that you're typing into this. So we could say on focus, and that's another one of the Tailwind pseudo kind of selectors. You can say on focus, let's say background indigo at maybe 200. There we go. That's a little bit much. Maybe 100 does the job, but I kind of like how bright that is. And then we want to do a little bit of padding on this button. So padding X of 4 as well. Okay, but notice how there's rounded edges on here and here. We definitely only want the left of the input to be rounded. So we can say rounded -L, and only the right of the button to be rounded, rounded -R. So there we go. We have a pretty cool looking button right there and form. And here, let's say background red at 300, hover background red at maybe 400. So it goes darker on this one. Cool. And then now for the other one, we definitely want to center this vertically. So we can say class is flex and items center. And that will round out our landing page. All right, so let me go back and uncomment out this section right here and bring this whole thing back right there. And that is going to be our landing page. So welcome to Doggo City. Never a sad day here. We have our header with our icon, our highlighted buttons. And I hope this was a good example at how to use Tailwind to quickly prototype out your designs. And you may not like it at first. I definitely was not a big fan when I first started using Tailwind. But the more I worked with it, the more I enjoyed it. And now when I'm going into projects where I actually don't have Tailwind, let's say there's Bootstrap or Bulma in another project, I have to go look at a lot of custom CSS. But if I'm in a Tailwind project, I can just look at the classes and go, oh, okay, that's how this is styled. So just give it a chance, read through the docs, start to learn a little bit of the CSS classes. I think it's the quickest way for me to prototype out designs like this. And I'm going to use it for pretty much all of my next upcoming projects. I really do enjoy working with Tailwind. So I hope that was helpful. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks to Brad for letting me be a guest on his channel. And if you did enjoy this, I have courses for Tailwind at maketailwindapps.com. And thanks for watching.